and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group biweekly call for March 2nd, 2017. 2017 is flying by for me. I don't know about all you guys out there and girls out there. But so we'll go ahead and take a look here at what this is all about and what we're doing for folks that might be new to the call or catching up. So we've started these special interest groups as part of the larger SharePoint Patterns and Practices program. And what this, the goal here is to allow folks that have a more specific interest around, sorry, I'm gonna mute somebody. Folks that have a more specific interest around JavaScript development, the SharePoint framework, client-side development in general. And so what we've done is started these special interest groups. There's one now for the PowerShell and core component as well. And you can, of course, attend all or some of these meetings, whatever fits your interests and your schedule. But the goal was to allow us to drill down a little more deeply into now the SharePoint framework that we've hit GA. And as well, the JavaScript core component we're developing alongside to help with the SharePoint development in the SharePoint framework, if you choose to use it. It's of course not required. So two great links down there at the bottom. The SPFx community link will get you out to the tech community, which is a great location if you have questions or want to have discussions with others in the community, as well as those of us on the core team. And then the bottom link, dev.office.com/SharePoint, is your one-stop shop for everything SharePoint development. So whether you want to learn about the new SharePoint framework, whether you want to learn about SharePoint add-in development, or even classic, full trust code development, there's resources there for all those areas on the dev.office.com/SharePoint, and that's of course being constantly improved as we go. So jumping into our agenda for today, the PnP.js core component, we'll do a quick update on that. A little bit on the SharePoint framework. Vesa will not be able to join us today. He's actually in the air to Munich for the SharePoint conference Munich. Or think that might be the right name. But we do have a couple of demos as well today. I'm going to talk about the Travis integration we set up. And then David Warner has a demo around JS link customizations, which is more related to classic sites, but is as well still very applicable if you're working in classic sites or 2013 or on premises, where you can still use JS link. It's a great technique if that's still available. And then we'll have time at the end, as we always do, for open discussion and other folks wanting to ask questions or make points. SharePoint Saturday Munich. Thank you, Nigel. So I thought it was bigger than a Saturday, but cool. So so I know a lot of folks from this call will be at that, which is really exciting, really cool. So make sure you connect with folks from the community there. So first off, a quick update for the JavaScript core component. Again, thank you as always to everybody that contributes, and thank you to everybody that provides feedback as well. It's invaluable to us to make everything, to make the library better for everybody's use. And then as well, your contributions really help to grow the library, because obviously those of us on the core team can only scale so much. So getting folks from the community jumping in, whether it's contributing code or answering questions and issues or helping out. I know John Liu really helped out on an issue with Angular, because I'll admit I am an Angular newbie. So that was really helpful. Appreciate that from John, and appreciate everybody else who jumps in and helps out with the questions as well. So moving forward, some quick updates. We're fixing issues as they come in, so thank you for reporting them. Appreciate that, and I do just want to say I appreciate the level of detail folks are including with the issues. So that's great to see. It really helps us sort of narrow down what the problem is and figure out how to fix it. So appreciate the details and appreciate the issues getting reported, and we are looking to fix those just as fast as we can. Our next release is going to be targeted for March 10th. That's, again, in line with the rest of the Patterns and Practices program, and we are going to continue to align to these monthly releases. So it'll be smaller, more regular releases, which I think will help get fixes and updates out there a little more regularly. We did have an issue come in. So there was an interesting thing the TypeScript folks did, they submitted a breaking change in a minor release. So TypeScript 2.2.1 introduced a breaking change with the types, the at types, what WG fetch library or reference, whatever you want to call it, where they decided suddenly to introduce all the typings for response and fetch and request and those things. So you got the duplicate definition error. So that was interesting. I appreciate folks reporting that. So just wanted to highlight that a little bit. So we've updated the package JSON in the SPPNP.js library to bring in the latest TypeScript, and we've updated our typings appropriately. And we'll have a little bit more about this in the release blog post, but it's going to mean either folks are going to need to update their local TypeScript in their projects to 2.2.1 or manually install the at types typings. So we'll detail that, we'll detail those steps, but it was one of those, it caught me by surprise, and I think it caught a lot of folks by surprise, judging by reading some of the issues in the various repos. I have also added in the TS-lint settings the prefer const flag and made all the associated updates throughout the file. So that is, if a variable is not ever reassigned, using const to declare it instead of let. So that's been enabled. So if and that should be all working. If you pull the latest code, you shouldn't get any issues. But if you're writing new code in our library specifically, this wouldn't affect if you're using this in other libraries. You might need to update and use const to get the linting to pass. We've also updated to Webpack 2. I did that last night. That was, I'll say, surprisingly easy. They have a nice guide on the Webpack site that you can go through and just kind of step-by-step follow that and update. And our Webpack configuration, to be fair, is pretty simple, so our updates were pretty minor. I think if folks had much more complicated Webpack configurations, that'd be a bigger deal, but I'll say for us, I found the process to be very easy. They do a nice job of outlining that. Lastly, if you haven't seen it, I tweeted it out 2 days ago, yesterday, so there's now an article on the official guidance on dev.office.com/SharePoint around using the SPPNP.js library in SharePoint framework. I did my example with Knockout, because there weren't a lot of knockout examples, but the sort of guidance in there would apply on whatever framework you'd like to use, whether that's React or no framework or Angular or whatever. Same guidance would apply, but this sample happens to be in Knockout. So check out that article, and there's an associated code sample in the samples repo now, so you can pull that down and play with that as well. So that sort of is a step-by-step guide in a little bit more detail than what we have on our wiki. And finally, I've got in the works an upcoming article on extending SPPNP.js. That's one of my sort of next big goals, is to make it much easier to extend the library and sort of enhancing the extension points available to folks. So if you really need to or want to sort of get into the internals of the library and kind of change how things behave a little bit, the article is also going to cover sort of making your own business objects wrapped around or using the library. So having your own sort of list objects and web objects and list item objects, and having custom methods and building on top of the SPPNP.js library for those business cases, which I think the Knockout.js example has a little bit of that in it. And I think it's a really powerful way, so you can sort of bind a view model based on the SPPNP.js doing the data work to your, in this case, Knockout, but same for React and the others, and then have all the methods sort of wrapped around, so you get a nice, easy integration path that way. So that article is upcoming, so look forward to that. There's an article on SharePoint Framework with Knockout at v1 not rc0. So the article that I just was talking about is with the GA bits. So it is applicable to v1, if you want to call it that. So it is using the GA bits and should work with the GA stuff. So as always, opportunities to participate. You can demo a SharePoint Framework web part on this call. Would love to see folks, more demos. Demo the SPFx in a project unrelated to SharePoint Framework. Certainly welcome that. If you can wrap the two together, that's great. But even if you just have a new SharePoint Framework web part you want to show off to the community, really invite folks. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of show off the cool stuff folks are doing out there in the world. Contribute on GitHub, either submitting issues, again, thanks to folks that are doing that, or submitting code. Thanks again, of course, the folks who are submitting those pieces of code and things like that. And then as always, we appreciate the feedback both on the JavaScript Core library as well as SharePoint Framework. The feedback really helps drive and make the product of SharePoint Framework better, and then the library of the SPFx better as well. Ralph's got a question. Anyone recall the Angular items out there for Angular 2, right? I'm not sure. I think there's samples out there for both. I think a lot of the samples are just Angular right now. And then the Angular 2 stuff is coming a little bit. There's a little bit more work to do around the componentization, if I'm remembering correctly. So SharePoint Framework updates. Correct. Angular 1 and Angular 2 are not the same. Right. So AC is answering you. Angular 2 doesn't work super great in SharePoint Framework today. So when I say Angular, I'm probably talking about Angular 1. But again, I'll fall back on my I know very little about Angular position right now. So that'll be my kind of cover for that. So some quick SharePoint Framework updates, and you guys are going to be a little surprised at how quick these are, simply because, again, Vase is in the air. But did want to point out, new guidance is always becoming available on the dev.office.com/SharePoint site. Go to Web Parts Guidance. You can see that new article I was just talking about, as well as some additional new articles from the rest of the team on various topics. And we're getting new articles out there. I won't say daily, but definitely weekly. We're getting new guidance out there on things as they come up. And there's some new guidance coming out on provisioning things through your SharePoint Framework web parts or through your SharePoint Framework package using the older style like Elements XML kind of technique. So folks can take a look at that. That is a 2/3 finished article. There's a few more details to be added there. But do check those out. Really encourage folks. I think there's some great guidance, some great learning for those kind of things. Looking for samples, again, aka MS SPFx-samples, adding stuff there. Again, I'd say weekly, if not daily, but definitely weekly. We're getting new samples in there, so you can check out the knockout one I was just talking about and others as well, of course. So do check that out. And again, I really want to encourage folks in the community, if you have a cool sample, contribute it here so others in the community can learn, and then let us know. We'd be really happy for you to demo it on the call here as well. So it's a great opportunity for you to get some visibility in the community and really help folks learn. So we're just kind of at the start of the SharePoint framework. I know a lot of folks on these calls have been using it for a while now through the various beta releases, the RC0, and now GA. You're going to start to see a bunch of new faces show up and new interest now that we're at GA, which is always really exciting. But this is a great chance for those of you that have been active and learning about this for a while now to help those who are just showing up to get up to speed and learn and really kind of give back and help that community grow around SharePoint Framework. And like I said, would really love for folks to submit samples and demo them on the call. A great opportunity for us all to learn from each other. So the latest developments in SharePoint Framework. I know you guys are really used to Vase's super dense slides, so I've just got one line item which I think is really exciting. We hit general availability. If you guys haven't pulled down the GA bits, please do. I'm really impressed. I got to see this pretty early, as did I know some other folks on the call. But how far it's come from what it was a year ago to now. and which makes me really excited for what it's going to continue to grow to be over time. And that, again, is big credit to all of you who have provided feedback through the issues list, feedback through the community. So keep that feedback coming because, again, we're listening and it makes it better for everybody. So we really love to see that feedback. So keep that coming, but pull down the GA bits, play with the GA bits, write some samples, submit some samples, demo on this call, let us know if something's broke, of course, but really start to play with that. The general availability stuff's really neat. Did want to touch briefly, you might have seen on the first day a few errors on the workbench. That should all be resolved. That was just the bits rolling out across our farms. So that should all be taken care of. Can you pull the GA bits down? You can pull the GA bits, and every tenancy right now should be updated. So nobody, that should all be done. That was a little bit late on the first day, mostly due to time zones. And I got hit by this, so it wasn't just certain folks, but that should all be resolved. And please do GA bits, and there's instructions as well on the dev.office.com on getting updated there, on getting updated to the GA. So here's a VESA slide. So getting started with SharePoint Framework, we've got lots of modules, lots of tutorials, lots of material on GitHub, on the docs site. So really encourage folks to dive in there, and then encourage folks that have already dove in, again, to kind of send the elevator back down, as they say, and help the folks that are just showing up and really help guide folks that have questions and get them involved in the SharePoint framework. Because as the whole community grows, we all benefit from that. We all learn from each other, and then we all end up with a better thing to use and develop on. So, like I said, we'll have time at the end for discussions, but we've got a couple demos here to go through today. And so I want to go first, and I'm going to share my desktop, share that one. And I'll wait for somebody to let me know when you can see that, when that comes through. While I'm waiting there, make David a presenter so he can be ready. Got it? Okay, great. So let's drop that down. And so what I wanted to talk about was the Travis integration, which folks may or may not be familiar with Travis. And Travis is a continuous integration tool. It's one of at least several out there. I found it very easy to integrate with, and I'll kind of show you what I did here in a second, but did want to show this is the sort of Travis dashboard, and you'll see here that we've got a lot of I can see a lot of the Microsoft stuff just because of Microsoft, but you'll be able to see, for example, here's one for my repo that passed. And so this is showing you, and it's got this really awesome log that shows you all the tests that were run, gives you some information on things that might have ran long, comes down here and tells you what was passing, pending, and these sort of things. So I think really exciting, really cool, and you get to see these tests. But sort of how does all this work? How does this sort of all come together? So the first thing I want to do is real quick, I'm just going to make a couple of meaningless updates so I can submit a pull request and sort of show you guys this process. And then as it's running, I'll walk you through the configuration. So I'm just going to say this interface defines the result of adding a field. So super meaningful comment. I think, we've all written great comments like that in the past. But now, the important thing is you can see I've got a change. So I'm just going to add that change. I'm going to commit that change, and then I'm going to push that change. Something we've all done a bunch of times, and if I'd been a good citizen, I would have tested my change, linted my change, and done the various things before I push this. But what you'll see now in Travis is you'll see it's automatically kicked off for my repo because I've taken the steps of setting up Travis for my personal repo. So I'm going to see the tests all run in my repo. And the other thing I want to do is while I'm here, so I'm going to do a new pull request out of my repo. So this is just demo. Normally I would fill this all out, again, being a good citizen, but I'm going to say create a pull request. And so what's going to happen now when I create this pull request is you're going to get the normal Microsoft legal stuff happens, but now you're going to see this Travis thing has popped up here. And so every time you submit a pull request now, this Travis build is going to run. And so you can click on the details, and you'll be able to see the details of your build. So these are actually running in parallel. They're completely separate. And so you're going to see mine is set up, and it's going to run all the tests actually against SharePoint. The one for your pull request is just going to run the linting, the building, and the packaging. It's not going to actually execute against SharePoint. And that's a limitation, not a limitation, but a thing you can't do because it would be an attack surface. So and I'll show you that in a second. But so every time you submit, you'll see this get updated here for the pull request, and then you'll see this when it updates. It'll show you success or failure. And so jumping back, now that we've got those running, and we'll come back to those in a second, what did we do to set this up? Well, first you go to the Travis website, and it's got a getting started guide, which is 2 or 3 steps, and it involves enabling Travis in your repo. And they walk you through that. It's very simple. It's like adding any of the other webhook-based integrations with Git you might have done in the past. Very similar. And then in our repo, you have to set up a .travis.yml file. And this is the file Travis uses to orchestrate its builds. Ours is very, very simple. These Travis files can be rather complex. You can do a lot of things. It's a very powerful tool. We've just scratched the surface with what we're doing, but it's already, I've seen already great value in doing these integrations even at this simple level. So first you tell it a language, in our case Node.js, meaning we're a JavaScript project. You can give it a version, so we're giving it just 6. What's one thing that's really cool about Travis that we're not doing currently but could certainly do in the future is you can create a matrix of testing. So I could do node 5, 6, 7. Then you can have different configurations for the various versions. You can make this whole matrix of testing. Excuse me. And it will run a bunch of separate builds for you across your entire matrix. So you can test a lot of different parameters all at once each time these things are submitted. And that's something we'll look at in the future. Like I said, it's always sort of, crawl before you can walk, before you can run. So this is us kind of getting started. Travis will automatically run an npm install for you. So it'll load everything in your package JSON. That's an automatic thing. We don't have to script that. But one thing we do have to do is, because we're using gulp, and this is right out of the Travis Getting Started guide, this before script. So you can run one or more scripts prior to any of your build operations. So we're installing gulp globally, so we can use the command line for gulp, because that's how our tests get run. And then you can see here, this is our actual script, and this is what is the actual build. And so what we've done is, and again, right out of kind of the Travis documentation, this is saying if it's not a pull request, I'm sorry, if it is a pull request, meaning pull request is not false, we're going to run our gulp command Travis pull request. Otherwise, we're going to run our gulp Travis push. So these are 2 gulp commands I wrote specifically for Travis. We could have used the standard gulp commands we use, but I found it easier because we had to make some modifications. So instead of having a bunch of if statements and trying to configure things, I found it and thought it would be much easier to just pull these out to their separate to a separate file and to be separate commands, because then we can do whatever we need to do for Travis. So looking at this, you'll see a lot of similarities between our other gulp files. So you can see our Travis pull request and our Travis push. So you can see here we've got the clean command. We're going to run the Travis linting, and the difference between the Travis linting is we're actually going to throw an error, so your build will fail on lint errors. So if you just are doing the build normally, not through Travis, linting won't actually produce errors. You'll get warnings. This is actually going to throw errors now for linting because we want the build to fail. We're going to run Travis test. We're going to run the standard packaging, so we're using our other gulp tasks, and we're going to run the packaging for the definitions to make sure those things work. So what does our Travis test do? It uses our build testing, and then it runs the testing with the web tests disabled because we can't access the environment variables we'll talk about in a second, because what could happen is those environment variables hold a client ID, a secret, and a web URL, which we need for our testing. And if you were submitting a pull request, there's steps you could take to very easily expose those values in your pull request and get our client ID and secret, etc. So it's a you could call it a limitation, but really it's a security feature of Travis that for pull requests, you can't get the environment variables we've set up. And I'll show you setting those up in a second here. And then for pushes, which is so when I merge my pull request in or when I do a merge from dev to master, we're going to run this Travis push, which again is going to do clean, our Travis linting. It's going to do our Travis web test, which is going to have the web tests enabled based on do we have the environment variables we need. Because if we don't, our test is just going to fail right away, and that doesn't make any sense. But if we do have those available, and again, these get set up just as node environment variables, so we're just doing process.env and then the name of our variables. And these are something we configured. So the PNP testing underscore is something we configured. And like I said, I'll show you that in a second. And so you can configure those, and you can do that in your own environment as well as we've set it up in ours. So if you're configuring this in your own repo, you can set up these environment variables and run the web tests on your own submissions. And the other thing we did here is I blew out the timeout to be 45 seconds per test. And every once in a while, we'll still see timeouts. And this is just, I think, has to do with it's running in these little virtual containers in Travis and communicating with SharePoint, and sometimes it just gets slow or hung up for whatever reason, and we might even see that. Sometimes it'll fail, I don't know, once every 10 times or so we'll get a timeout. So I've bumped it up to 45 seconds. That seems high enough to me, but you know, folks find that we're seeing too many timeouts, we can always bump that up again. So those are our Travis commands. And that's our entire Travis file right now. And like I said, we're just scratching the surface of what you can do with Travis. So as we get more into it, we will start, expanding this, doing a little bit more. But for now, we're already able to run all our tests, and we're actually able to run our tests against SharePoint. So keep in mind, you can see here, we're doing our setting the global settings. Which is what the testing stuff grabs the settings out of global, and we're getting those from the process. So what I wanted to show you is, oh good, all our checks have passed. So this was my pull request. All my checks have passed. Great. So if they had failed, there'll be a little link here to go see the details. And so I'm just going to say merge this pull request. One of the things you can do with Travis is you can actually, if things pass, you can auto merge things. You can, I mean, there's so much power behind it. And so we'll see what makes sense as we grow in terms of adding those features as we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and merge my pull request. You'll also see these builds passed. And if we look at this SharePoint build, here's it's installing all the NPM stuff, and if you look at the log, you can see all the things it did. And in this case, we didn't run any of the web tests because this was a pull request. So it passed. But if we look at the one in my repo, it also passed, which is always good to see. But what we're doing is the same stuff. We're running the linting, the packaging, but you can see now we're running the web tests. And so every once in a while you'll get these little notes when things went a little long, and it'll show you all the tests that pass. And I actually updated the testing to give you this verbose output because I think it's nice to see that, especially since this is running remotely, that we can see what's going on in a little bit more verbose manner. You can see everything passed, fantastic, no timeouts. We have 4 pending tests that haven't gotten written, and our build exited with 0, which means passing. So what I want to show you, so this is in my personal repo. This is my fork of the JS core. And so one of the things you can see, if I go to settings, and you can set this up in your own repo as well, these are the environment variables. So you can add environment variables of any name you want. You can give it any value you want. You can actually say if a value will be displayed in the build log. So obviously for client ID secret, these things, we don't want that. And then I can just add that. And now that any name would be available on that process.env.anyname. And so I can add, in our case, we needed 4. I could add any number of these to configure the build that I might need. And then I can come in and delete these. So really powerful, really simple. You can also set stuff up. You can do variables in the YML file and encrypt them and all these sorts of things. And I started to play with that and then found this and thought, well, this is about 100 times simpler. So really a big fan of that. And you have settings for building on pushes, building on pull requests. You can build only if the Travis file is present, things like that. And then to show you, so this is in the SharePoint JS core. So this is now also going to run all our web tests because this is a merge. And I want to show you the settings here. So I've got the same client ID, secret, notification URL, etc. One thing, they're different values. Obviously, I'm using my personal site for my repo, and then we have a patterns and practices site for these tests to run. But we've also set up, and this is a beta feature of Travis, but a cron job, so a timer job, a daily job to run. So you can do this daily, weekly, or monthly at this point. And again, beta feature, so they're enhancing this as they go. But so now every day, we're just going to go ahead and run the entire test suite from the dev branch against SharePoint Online. And we're doing something very similar with the CSOM core component because this is actually, we've found bugs that have been introduced into SharePoint Online by doing our daily testing. Or we found changes to SharePoint Online that aren't bugs, that are changes that might break something we're doing. So this will be a nice daily check, and I've actually just scheduled this today for the first time. I think that's going to be another great feature of Travis for us. So that's kind of our Travis integration. I wanted to talk through that. Like I said, these take about 5.5 minutes to run. If you want to set this up for your own repo, like I said, you just need to grant Travis access, go in and set these environment variables. And again, if you look at the blog post I published on this, I've got the names of the environment variables and the descriptions and more details on the setup process there if you'd like to go through it. And one thing, if you break the build, or if I break the build, this cool email comes out telling you it's broken, and then you can go look at the details and see what happened. Generally, I'll tell you it's a timeout. All the failures I've seen past when I was just learning and setting things up have been timeouts. So right here where it says cancel, you'll have a little button to restart the build. So you can always restart the build if you should need to do that. Like if you just see timeouts, if you just restart it, it should run fine the second time. It just means there was a hiccup in the network or something took a little too long, something like that. So that's Travis. I'm going to bounce back to this. And David, if you're ready and want to start taking over as a presenter, I'm going to scroll up and see if there's any questions. So, can you pull the okay, I'm caught up. David, are you there? Yes, okay, there we go.
Yep, should be loading. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sure can.
Okay. Did you want to cover any of the questions, or are you good to go?
Go ahead, and we'll cover them in the discussion at the end. So yeah,
okay.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. So as Patrick had mentioned, this is really utilizing the classic mode within SharePoint. Using JS Link will be the focus. I'll give you the dime tour here in a minute of everything we've got. The point, though, really is that we're utilizing and extending, taking advantage of the API, the hooks that SharePoint provides us, right? So while the demos here really are utilizing and taking advantage of items in the classic mode, we know that things are going to come out and be available to us in the modern experience, right? We saw some of that last week. I believe they're being coined as code parts, and I think JS Link was in line for one of those items. So, once those details do come to fruition and are exposed to us and we learn the inner workings of them, a lot of what we see today should be able to be taken advantage of and utilized in that way for the modern experience. So hopefully don't look at any of this as a dying breed or something that won't be available in the future. Likely, if you just a lot of this came from the creativity of looking at the APIs, the hooks, the openings that SharePoint provides to us to take advantage of building a branded experience. So, okay, so I'll give you a little quick tour. You see Rocky here is being used. I used non-business data typically when I show demos because it helps people focus in on the information and the functionality as opposed to getting caught up with trying to relate the data to their data. No one in their right mind is going to say and look at Rocky and say, yeah, that relates to my business. Great, let me focus on that. So it's usually a fun topic. Everything you see here is inside of a responsive design. So we've got our navigation here, which is actually a mega menu. And is responsive friendly. I'll show you how that works in a moment. We have typical items, slider, upcoming events, company news, some FAQs, and quick links. And we'll focus on the quick links part of it in just a minute after I give you the quick tour. As I mentioned, it is fully responsive, so I will emulate the responsive environment here, and I'll start shrinking the screen. And there's a point to all of this above and beyond JS Link that I wanted to impress upon you. So as we get down, we'll get down to 767 as our smallest mobile experience, and that invokes a more mobile-friendly environment. Everything is touch-friendly, and now we can see that our menu has also been conformed to allow for a better mobile experience, and that is actually driven by a SharePoint list that's been performance tuned, so it's not actually pulling from the list every single time the page loads. The list gets exported to JSON, excuse me, so it makes it very efficient. Now, the cool thing about all this that you'll see, and again, just trying to help you with the understanding that with some creativity we can actually get a very user-friendly experience, is this is all done with no master page, no custom master page, I should say. So just so you know, there's no wizard behind the curtain. Here's my site right here, and here we are. We're living in the custom, the existing out-of-the-box master page. No, the mega menu's not, well, this version of it's not a commercial product. I actually created it myself, so we can feel free to ping me later if you have questions about that, and I can kind of walk you through that and talk more about it. But everything you're seeing is done with no custom master page. It's all being used in user custom actions that's currently available in the classic experience, and then we'll see what's available in the modern experience. The area we're going to focus on, though, today is the quick links. So this is usually a compelling story for business users, simply because content authors want to focus on content, and they want to have the best possible content that they can provide. Usually that means content authors like to utilize things like icons, thumbnails, images. They want to be very visually focused in their web application and be able to drive their clients and their web consumers to be able to utilize and enjoy the experience. So let's talk through what a content author would think when they look at something like this. Well, they'll look at that and they'll say, okay, there's a why and there's a what. There's a how and a what. How am I going to get this information in there? So they'll go through questions, and I know it because I've done it. How am I going to get the images up there? How am I going to make sure they're sized appropriately? How am I going to make sure they're in the right color? How am I going to make sure they're stored appropriately? How am I going to make sure the web part consumes them? So you can imagine that for a content author that perhaps has been introduced to SharePoint or is maybe very new to SharePoint, or even one that's got some degree of experience, it's a lot of crippling questions that they can be faced with. So before they even get to the what am I going to include for my content consumers, they're crippled by the how. How am I going to accomplish all of this? And so when you really start building the sites, you want to think about what is it that I can contribute to not only the content consumers of the site, but also the content authors? And this is where JS Link comes in. Now, what many people don't know, what they've seen, is JS Link is a powerful reference within a list view web part. So if you drop a list view web part, you can go in. JS Link allows you to associate a JavaScript file to your list view web part, and then within that JavaScript file, you can override the visual experience or the interface for your list view. It doesn't have to look like it does out of the box. But what a lot of people don't know is that you can actually associate a JS Link property to an individual site column. And that allows you to override the experience of that individual site column in any list that has been added to any content type to override and provide a different experience. And so what we see here is a collection of icons. And we see if we drop down, we've got another item here. This is all driven by a list. And so the users may look at that and say, great. Content author may go in and say, wonderful, but if I'm going to have to give my users a collection of images to choose from, how am I going to do that? And what happens when the boss says we need to go change the size or the color? Now I'm spending my weekend updating and changing all of those assets. Well, we wanted to provide a better experience using JS Link. And again, behind the scenes is really just JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. So if we go look at this particular column for this, I've got it up right here. I've called it an iconography engine. Because really what we're doing is we're providing them through a wizard, an engine that allows them to choose iconography. So we see that it's really, behind the scenes, it's nothing more than a single column of type text that stores data. And that's it. Nothing more complex. There's no custom field here going on. It really is utilizing complete out-of-the-box functionality within this site column. And if I come over to the client online browser and we pull up and look at that particular link right here, or the site column right here, and we look at the JS Link property, well, okay, great. Now we see, much like we do with the list view web part, we can reference a JS, and that's what we've done here. So what does that do for us? What's the end result? Well, if we go into the list that drives this particular web part, we've got links here that you can see. What we've done is any link that's located in the dropdown is considered a non-featured link or item, and any icon that we want, or any list view or list item that we want to show up as an icon, will flag as featured. And so the experience now for the user becomes, instead of referencing an image or having to go to a library, grab the URL, go back to the list where they're going to create the quick link, pop it in, and then hope that that doesn't get changed, no one deletes those images when the images changes, what needs to happen, etc. You actually can override the entire experience. So here's our list right here, and you can see something a little different. We've got some icons actually being displayed here, and we've got this color box here. So what does that look like when you go in? Well, this is actually all driven by that JS. This is our view form within the actual experience within a list. So what does it look like if we were to create or edit an existing item? We'll go into Amazon here, and I'll edit an item, and we will see when it loads something a little different as well. You can see quickly, if you noticed, right before everything kind of finished loading, you saw a little bit of that field. So we saw it was really behind the scenes just a text box. But our JavaScript has now taken over and said, hey, we want to change the entire experience here. And we want to now give the user the ability to select the icon through a clickable interface. So if I wanted to change this icon, I can come in here. Again, all this is JavaScript building an application and a mobile dialog that allows you to cycle through a collection of icons and choose an icon that might be best for the use case in your particular scenario. If I cancel out of this, we'll go in and actually create a new one. And once that list loads, I'll go ahead and select. And you saw that it said change icon. So it was contextually aware that an icon had already been selected. So when I go in and select to create a new item, we can see it's loading, and now it's a select icon with no icon being displayed. And so we're on a Microsoft call. So we'll go ahead and create a Microsoft. We'll say we want it to open in a new window. We'll say yes, it's featured because we want the icon to show up. .com. go ahead and select our icon. Up comes the modal. Again, this is all driven by the single JS file. We'll go ahead and down here, and we can go ahead and select the Windows logo. And then an additional JS link site column, as you can see here, is the color. While we're focused on the iconography engine, there are ways in which you can extend the ability to do other things. So again, this quick link color is just a text field in the back, but we're overwriting that experience to now be able to provide a color. And so we'll go ahead and just select blue to make it stand out. This particular interface for the color is actually out of the box within SharePoint. This is referencing an out-of-the-box page within SharePoint, on-prem and online. But it doesn't mean you have to use this one. We've got a more robust color picker that I've created that allows you to have shortcuts and all of that. So this is just one example of how you could provide that experience. And we'll hit OK. We see now that we've got all our settings. We'll hit Save. It'll take us back to our primary list view. And we see it's been added. Our icon shows up. Our color is now there. And so what we'll do is we'll go back to the home page. I will turn off the mobile experience. I'll refresh the page, and we should see it showing up, I believe, as the first or last item. I think I've got that sorted. Descending. Yep, first item. So now we see it showing up. And from a content authorship perspective, you can imagine the better experience now that they're having to go through when they go in and select. So now they're not wrapped up in the how am I going to accomplish this? How am I going to accomplish that? They're literally able to just enjoy the experience now by going through an interface that we've custom built for them, but is much easier than having to go reference URLs or potentially worry about the assets. Now, your question naturally next may be, that's great, but we still have to worry about all those images, right? And what if they wanted another color? Well, you may have noticed a tab I've got up here. These are not actually images. It's a font. It's an icon font, and in this particular case, it's using Font Awesome. So Font Awesome is up to 4.7. This particular example is using 4.4, but that's what allows us to actually resize all these with nothing more than CSS if we wanted, and what we're able to color it if we wanted to with CSS. And that's what we're using, is we're actually using CSS to color these. We're taking the color property and we're applying the style to these individually so that each icon could have a different color if we wanted. If we wanted to go in and update Amazon to be orange, or Google to be red, or PayPal to be yellow, or any other color you want. As you saw, I could put in a hex value. That can be done because it is an icon font. What's nice about that is if you're graphic designer background, you can actually go in and add your own fonts if you wanted to. So you'll understand that by vector it's scalable, and that means it can be infinitely scaled. So if I were to go back here and just as a test case, I'll come over to our elements. I will select this guy, and we'll come in here and we'll say font size, because it is a font. We'll say 10 pixels. And you can see it's now shrunk small, but if I just start increasing, it's going to start creating a very big. You'll notice there's no lack of quality. As I continue to increase it, it just infinitely scales, and you're not losing any quality. You don't see any of that noise that you see with a typical image, and so you're able to use that in different ways in different web parts. It's not just this web part; it can be consumed. I created a use for it within the mega menu, in fact, so they're able to associate icons to their individual menu items if they wanted. And so you can see the multi-benefit because it is a JS link associated to the site column. That means any list you add it to, it's now there and usable. And then you just set up your web parts to consume that data and apply it. And one other note, while it is using Font Awesome, we had a client that said, that's great, that's really cool, that's neat, but you know what, our logo's not in the brand section. We want our logo. Because it is a font, you can actually create a custom font. There are tools out there and web apps that you can use to actually go in and create your your own custom font that is all still vector driven. You would utilize custom SVGs, and so you can actually do that. And we had one client that said we have a whole collection of custom SVGs that we want to use that are part of our brand. And so we combined Font Awesome and the custom SVGs into what we call a custom font for them. And it's still font, still gets cached, still vector, still all the benefits that you get from the out-of-the-box Font Awesome icon font set, but has a custom font, so they can do whatever they want. So behind the scenes, what the code looks like, and I know we're running short on time, is you really, again, just have an individual JS file. So here's our iconography engine JS file. And when you go in, you can see I'm fairly adamant about documentation and organization. I've got the table of contents here that kind of outlines how everything is working. But when you come down to the meat and potatoes of it, really what you're doing is you're associating the icon site, or excuse me, the site column that we're using. And so here's my site column name. Here's the different modes within the list that we experience. So you've got view, display form, new form, and edit form. And then what you can do is you just associate a specific function to that. And so we can see that we're overwriting the customized field rendering. And so the new item, or the view item, is pretty simple. All we're really doing is overwriting, and we're going in and needing to identify whether or not an icon's been selected or put in as a content value. And so I'll do a search quick on that. That one's easy to kind of consume because most of your view is not doing much, right? So I dynamically lazy load the CSS. We don't want to overload the system if it's not needed. I can see I've got some development stuff here for demo purposes, and then we set the icon wizard HTML, and then I return that, and then that's what SharePoint goes in and displays as our HTML as opposed to what's out of the box. The editing of it, though, that's a little different, right? So if we go back up and we look at a new item form or an edit item form, then obviously that means that the user is going to go in and potentially change that value. So if we look at the new item form, we'll search for that. And it's pretty easy to find, or I could have found it via my table of contents here. We can see we register the callback for the get value, right? So we've got our form context, and then what we do is, being that we're injecting our own HTML here to handle everything, here's the display of our HTML, and of course there's additional HTML here that is invoked when this information is clicked on. To bring up that pop-up, then we could we can reference that, and so then we return. We do a document by element, and we get the value that's actually stored, and then the init callback goes in and grabs the information. Right, this is what's returned to the actual storage. So when they go in, and what gets stored in for the actual icon, when we look at this, so I'll come here, I'll hover over this, you can see this content value is actually what gets stored. So when they click on a button, or excuse me, not this content value, the actual name of it. So in particular, Amazon is stored as FA Amazon, and so Amazon's the actual name for that icon. And so when they come in here, and I will edit one. The easiest way to associate a JS file with that's loading is actually via PowerShell, really. It's not an interface that's inside of SharePoint right now as part of like the typical interface, but there is also some JS files that you can get. You can load it in like a script editor or a content editor directly on a page that then lets you put in your field name, your site column name, the path to your JS, and so you could create your own wizard interface to actually create the JS files within the SharePoint interface. The easiest way, though, to answer your question is really PowerShell. I have a PowerShell script that just connects to the local site or the SharePoint Online site, asks for the site column name, asks for the JS link reference, and there you go. But behind the scenes here, what's actually being stored in that value is, you can see the actual value associated to it. And so when each icon is displayed here, if we look at the same thing, you can see that it also has names associated. So here's Hourglass 1, Hourglass 2, Hourglass 3, and so on and so forth. And as we scroll through each one of these, then you see they all have their own names, and that's how they get transcoded. Then that information is stored in a JSON file. So when this gets loaded, the JSON file is what we use as our key to the icon category. Right, so you can create your additional own custom icon categories. The categories I'm using there is what Font Awesome has associated. Then you have a title and the actual class name. So here we've got adjust, and we've got retweet, et cetera, et cetera. And the color picture you saw is really not much different. It's set up the same way, a little bit more simplistic, but we've got our function names that get called from the same sort of thing. Our field name, view, display, edit, new. And so that's how it's driven. In the interest of time, I'll open it up for any questions. Again, the whole point is that this is a way of looking at the API, the hooks, the interfaces that SharePoint provides to us, and getting creative in a way that allows us to really enhance the experience for not only our content consumers, but our content authors, right? Because if our content authors feel restricted, then they're not going to be able to worry about the what. They're going to be crippled by the how. So let's see. Have you found a good way to CDN these across site collections? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a number of ways to do that now. I mean, a custom CDN, you got the Office 365 CDN, and so really it's just however you'd like to do that. Let's see, if possible, you could put everything in the root site. Oh, okay, yeah, it's helping answer that, and reference starting with the root. Yeah, so there is ways to do that if you want to. It's really just a reference. So you saw in the client browser here, it's referencing site collection. You don't have to do that, and so you could change how that's referenced. In this particular case, it is an individual site collection, and so we just wanted to focus there for consumption purposes of the JS file. All right, we have no time left, so I'll hand it back over to Patrick. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it. Let me know if you have any additional questions, or feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome stuff, David. That was really cool, really great to see. And I think, as you said, a lot of those techniques would be applicable to SharePoint framework projects or just sort of client-side development in general. It's not, obviously, JS Link was what was used here, but there'd be other ways to sort of get these things out there. So really cool. Would love to see that out there somewhere so folks can go check out those samples if they're not already public. So did want to circle back a little bit on the questions I saw on what I talked about. AC was asking, does Travis CI allow for connecting to the container? No, I do not believe so, though that is an oft requested feature from what I saw. Circle CI is also great. Travis, I chose Travis simply because, one, it was the first one I tried and it worked really well, and two, Microsoft has actually purchased additional build time for Travis, so we can run a lot of stuff in parallel there, so that drove the decision a little bit. But there's a lot of choices out there. Circle, there's others out there, so I don't mean to say Travis is better, best, whatever. Pick what works for you. They all have different features, different capabilities, so check that stuff out. Kenny asked, still missing what Travis is doing for us. Why do I want to use it? This was answered a little bit, but I also just wanted to say, and kind of echoing the responses you got in the thread, that yes, it runs our tests for us, and what it really does from my point of view is every time someone submits the code, instead of me or one of the other core team members having to pull it down and run all these tests ourselves, it automatically runs all these tests. It runs all the linting, it runs the build, the package, and makes sure sort of all those basic checks work. Because sometimes I'd forget to do that, something would get into the actual dev branch that might be broken, something like that. So it makes sure every time we're running at least the basic set of checks, and then once we do the merge, running the full test suite. Russell's asking, where do the Travis builds run? Those run in the cloud. They run in containers inside the Travis service. Exactly how that is set up, I don't, off the top of my head, have all the details, but I want to say they're using Docker containers, but that may or may not be true, but I believe that's what they're using. And then Nigel is asking, is Travis a Microsoft-approved tool? Yes and no. I mean, it's not something we've officially come out and endorsed, and I don't mean to do that on this call. Like I said, Yeah, Travis is using Docker. Thank you, AC. So this isn't me or Microsoft saying Travis is the best. Everyone should use it. Like I said, I tried it first. Microsoft, have bought some additional cycle time in Travis. Drove the decision a little bit. So we're using it for a lot of our stuff, but that's absolutely not to say that that's the only choice. Lots of choices out there with lots of different features, and you should choose the one that works best for you and your projects. Travis is one of those choices and the choice we made. So it's not meant to be an endorsement or sort of a, this is the better of all the choices. So hopefully I answered those questions. Unfortunately, not a ton of time for open discussion this week. We will have plenty of time on hopefully the next call for open discussion. Vesa will be back as well. So do try out the GA bits. Bring your questions to the next call. Next meeting will be March 16th. I'm going to check on the invite and make sure that's working, because I think it worked for everybody but me, which is interesting. But so see you guys on the 16th. Thanks everybody for joining, and let's keep the great conversations going across the various social channels. Have a great weekend. Talk soon, everybody. Thanks.